Ever found yourself trapped in a cycle of endless thoughts and worries? You're not alone. This mental hamster wheel is what we call overthinking. It's a common issue affecting many of us, where our mind is constantly analyzing, dissecting, and worrying about every single detail. Overthinking can turn our life into a constant state of anxiety and stress, sapping our energy and joy. But fret not, overthinking is not a life sentence. There are ways to break free. Before we can tackle overthinking, it's crucial to understand its roots. Overthinking often sprouts from a seed of anxiety, which can be fueled by stress, fear, or uncertainty. Imagine your mind as a garden, where thoughts are the plants. Anxiety is like an invasive species, spreading quickly and threatening to choke out the rest of the growth. It's not enough to just trim back the invasive thoughts, we need to dig down to the root to truly address the problem. Stress acts as a catalyst, accelerating the growth of anxiety. It may be triggered by external pressures like work or relationships, or internal ones like high expectations for oneself. Fear, often linked to past experiences or perceived future threats, can also stimulate overthinking. Then there's uncertainty, the soil in which anxiety thrives. Not knowing the outcome of a situation can lead to an endless cycle of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. Knowing the root cause is the first step towards overcoming overthinking, but what's next? Mindfulness. Ever heard of it? It's our first strategy to overcome overthinking. Now, what is mindfulness? At its core, mindfulness is about being fully present, engaged in the here and now, not lost in your thoughts, worries, or fears. It's about noticing and accepting what's happening in this very moment, without judgment or resistance. Imagine you're sitting by a river. Your thoughts are like the water, always flowing, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent. Mindfulness is like sitting on the bank, watching the water flow by without trying to change its course. It's about observing, not interfering. This simple act of observation can disrupt the cycle of overthinking. When you're mindful, you're not trying to solve problems or plan for the future, you're just being, just observing. This creates a space, a gap in the constant stream of thoughts, and that gap is where peace and clarity can be found. So, how do you practice mindfulness? There are countless techniques, but let's talk about a few that are particularly effective for combating overthinking. First, there's mindful breathing. This involves focusing all your attention on the sensation of your breath coming in and going out. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back to your breath. Next, there's mindful walking. This involves paying attention to the sensation of your feet touching the ground, the feeling of the wind on your skin, the sounds around you. Again, when your mind wanders, gently bring it back to these sensations. Lastly, there's mindful eating. This involves truly savoring each bite, paying attention to the taste, texture, and aroma of the food. This not only enhances your enjoyment of the meal, but also helps you stay present. Each of these techniques is a way of training your mind to stay in the present moment, rather than getting lost in thoughts about the past or the future. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes. Mindfulness, a simple yet powerful tool. But there's more. Our second strategy is a more practical one: problem solving. You see, overthinking can often make us feel like we're sinking in a sea of our own thoughts, unable to do anything but sink deeper. But what if we could change that? What if we could turn this passive process into an active one? With problem solving, that's exactly what we're aiming to do. So how do we go about it? Well, the first step is to identify solvable problems. Overthinking often stems from a feeling of uncertainty or fear. It's a reaction to all those what-ifs and maybes that plague our minds. But not all problems are unsolvable. Some of them, in fact, can be addressed and resolved. And that's where problem solving comes into play. Once we've identified a problem that we can solve, the next step is to make a plan. This doesn't have to be a complex one. It could be as simple as saying, if I'm worried about not having enough time to finish a project, I'll create a schedule and stick to it. The goal here is to transform our vague fears into concrete steps that we can take to address them. And finally, we must take action. This is perhaps the most important part of the problem-solving process. Without action, our plan is nothing more than a piece of paper. It's only when we start to implement our plan that we truly begin to overcome our overthinking. The beauty of this approach is that it turns our thoughts from something passive, something that happens to us, into something active, something that we can control. Instead of spiraling into a vortex of what-ifs, we're now actively working towards resolving our problems. So with problem solving, we switch from being victims of our thoughts to being in control. But there's one more strategy to share. Our third and final strategy is acceptance and letting go. You see, overthinking often stems from our desire to achieve perfection, to control every aspect of our lives, to prevent mistakes and mishaps. But life, in its beautiful complexity, doesn't bend to our will. It's unpredictable, filled with imperfections and moments that are out of our control. Recognizing this is the first step towards acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation or defeat. It means understanding that perfection is a myth, that mistakes are part of the human experience. It means embracing life in all its unpredictability, knowing that we cannot control everything, and that's perfectly all right. Now, letting go is the next step. It's about releasing that tight grip we have on our thoughts, our expectations, our need for control. It's about allowing life to flow naturally, without constant analysis or worry. It's about being okay with the unknown, with the uncertain. Remember, our minds are like a garden. Overthinking is the weed that chokes our mental peace. Acceptance is the gardener who recognizes the weed, and letting go is the act of uprooting it. But the gardener doesn't stop there. He plants seeds of positivity, watered with patience and nurtured with love. So the next time you find your mind spiraling into a maze of overthought, pause. Accept the situation for what it is. Let go of the need for perfection and control. Plant positivity instead. Sometimes the best solution is simply to let go. Overthinking, a common but conquerable problem. As we've journeyed through this topic, we've unpacked the root of overthinking. It's often deeply ingrained, stemming from past experiences or fear of the future, but understanding its origin is the first step towards overcoming it. Mindfulness, a powerful tool, allows us to be fully present in the moment, reducing the mental chatter that fuels overthinking. By focusing on the here and now, we can redirect our energy towards productive thought processes. We've also explored problem solving, a proactive approach that helps us deal with situations instead of worrying about them. It's about turning "what if" into "what can I do?" Finally, acceptance and letting go, a skill that takes time to master but is vital in our fight against overthinking. It's about embracing the uncertainty of life and understanding that not all things are within our control. Remember, the power to overcome overthinking lies within you. It's a journey and every step counts.